If you or someone you know is struggling with alcoholism or addiction, do not hesitate to reach out for help. You can find numerous free resources on our website, thebeginagainpodcast.com, and there are tons of resources and support networks available online, in person, or just a phone call away. You don't have to face this challenge alone. Welcome to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes. On the Begin Again podcast, we delve into the inspiring journeys of individuals who have overcome alcoholism and addiction and emerged as true trailblazers in entrepreneurship, business, sports, and beyond. Through authentic, uplifting, and profound conversations with our guests, we aim to shatter the stigma surrounding addiction and demonstrate that recovery can be a catalyst for remarkable success, strength, and resilience. We firmly believe that by listening to these accounts, you will be empowered to unlock your own potential, instigate positive change in your life, and contribute to the creation of a better world. So, get ready to be inspired and embark on your own personal journey of growth with the Begin Again podcast. Welcome back to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes, and today I am honored to welcome Natalee King to the show. Natalee has an inspiring story that covers loss, trauma, depression, addiction, and recovery. Natalee served in the Air Force where she met her husband and they welcomed the birth of their baby boy. But not long after that, in 2013, her husband was tragically killed in a training accident. Natalee found sobriety in February of 2018, and she had the courage to share her story out loud on TikTok, which you can find in our show notes and which she's going to share with us today. Natalee, thank you so much for coming on. It's really an honor for you to be here and a privilege to have you share your story with us.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, I thank you. And I know you're in Florida. We spent some years in Florida. I love the West Coast of Florida. How long have you been in Florida?
Well, I guess 10 years now. It's been 10 years. So I love it here. It's beautiful. And I've been making some really good memories. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, if you would, let's jump in and let's take us back. And I want to hear how you came to the point of sharing this all out loud, which is, I think, and you said it off camera, healing, which I only imagine it is. And you're helping so many people with your story. But if we can hear it from you again, I'd love to hear your story.
Absolutely. So I'll start at the beginning. I kind of wrote, like a timeline down. So if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at.
No, good stuff.
But, I would like to start, I dabbled here and there in my teen years with pills. I have an older sister. She was 7 years older than me, and she was actually a pill addict. And I didn't really know how bad her addiction was at that time in my life. It wasn't until 2008, my sister died from a drug overdose when I was 18. That was absolutely traumatizing for my family and I. I have a younger brother. He was 16 at the time of my sister's death, and he was actually there with her that night. And he's the one that found her, and he performed CPR, sternum rubs. He told me the whole story. And he said, when the ambulance arrived, she was pronounced dead. I didn't get there until later on that night. And so that alone is traumatizing. So I can't imagine what my younger brother went through. After my sister's death, I had a suicide attempt at 19. I had taken a handful of aspirin and I fell asleep hoping I wouldn't wake up. And when I did, my eyes were like real foggy. My ears were muffled. And I remember telling my dad, he was the only one home. And I was like, Dad, I did this. I was freaking out. And my dad, he was a military guy. He was a helicopter rescue swimmer in the Coast Guard. He had a different way of going about things. So after I told him what I did, he actually came into my room with his 9mm and he cocked it back. And he told me, he said, if you want to effing die, then let's see you do it. And he handed me his gun. And at 19, I was real rebellious. And I just remember taking it from him, holding it to my head. And I was yelling at him, fine, I'll do it. I don't care anymore. And when I pulled the trigger, the gun went click. And my dad took it out of my hand and he was like, get your butt in the car. We're taking you to the emergency room right now. And that was really the first time I was institutionalized. After I was institutionalized that first time, I was able to join the Air Force. They chalked my depression and suicide attempt up to situational. And so I was able to join the Air Force and I moved to Japan. It was a great place to start, a young woman starting out her life and her career. And so I was very, very excited to move to Japan and start, I was a vehicle operator. So that's what I started doing. And I started on the job training and it was a lot of fun. I actually met a guy in Japan. His name was John King. And we fell in love really quickly. We were head over heels with each other. It was like a whirlwind romance. And he took me to the top of Tokyo Tower and he proposed to me. And we got married in Fusa, Japan. And then I ended up pregnant. And it was a boy. And we were so happy because my husband, he had a namesake. He was John King the second, and then my son is John King the third. So that was super exciting for us to do that. After Japan, I moved to Maryland, Andrews Air Force Base, and I actually gave birth at Maryland at Andrews. That's when 8 months after our son was born, my husband was killed in an on-base accident. It was absolutely devastating. It was a lot different than my sister's death. It affected me differently, I guess I should say. It changed my entire life, my daily routine. I mean, it changed my trajectory of my future. It changed everything. And change alone is hard. And so change when you are postpartum and you have a brand new baby and your husband is just killed, it was extremely, extremely difficult. There's bits and pieces of that time in my life where I don't remember a lot. Trauma is strange in what it does to your mind.
Yeah.
It blocks things out that need to be blocked out, I guess. So I remember after my husband's death, the day that he died, I had 2 military doctors come to my bedside and they prescribed me Xanax to help me cope and get through the days. It helped at first. It got me out of bed. It got me to, I don't know, stop crying. It made me feel numb to the pain. Pretty quickly, I got addicted to Xanax. My son and I from Andrews Air Force Base, we moved to Florida, to Sarasota, Florida, because that's where my husband was from. And I wanted my son to grow up around his husband's family, my husband's family. And so I thought that was the best option at the time. My addiction got noticeably worse. It started off doctor shopping, things like that. But when my tolerance got higher and I couldn't keep up with it, I eventually took to the street, buying any way I can, any way that I could get them, find them online, anything like that. My mom and dad came up to me one day and they told me that I don't think you're going to make it out of your addiction alive. And we don't want your son to go into the system. So they begged me to sign custody over to them. And that was a really hard decision to make. And I thought about it long and hard, but eventually I agreed and I signed my son over to my parents. And from then on, I mean, my addiction just took its course. I had another suicide attempt at 25. And this time I had taken some Xanax and I crashed my car into a light pole. And I woke up and my car was totaled. I woke up in the hospital and I was institutionalized again. From then on, I was in and out of institutions. I was in and out of detox, rehabs, treatment facilities. And nothing was working. Nothing could get me out of my addiction. And my parents were at a loss. They were basically they were waiting for me to end up like, my sister.
Yeah.
I mean, they already lost one daughter to addiction, so I don't blame them for thinking that way. One day I got a message. This was about 4 years after my husband's death.
Okay.
I got a message online from a guy who he went to high school with my husband. So he knew a little bit about me, a little bit about what had happened. And he asked if we could go out to eat. And I agreed. And the whole time I was with him, I was on Xanax and I was passed out. He ended up bringing me home to my parents' house. We're basically telling him, you can leave, I guess, now, thanks for bringing her home. And he asked if he could intervene and try to help get me sober. This guy, his name is Justin, and he had just gotten out of the Army. He did 7 years in the Army. So he had the time to help me get sober. The very next day, I gave him all of the Xanax that I had, and we began a slow taper. And it took me about 2 years to fully get off of Xanax with him and my parents' help.
Wow.
After those 2 years, at the very end of my Xanax taper, I found out I was pregnant. Also within those 2 years, Justin and I fell in love. So I guess I should say that first before the pregnant part, but we fell in love and I had gotten pregnant, and I was in recovery, and I was just so grateful that my life had turned around and I wasn't living in chaos constantly.
Yeah.
But in the back of my mind, I always thought to myself, and I still do to this day, something tragic could happen and it could take me spiraling back into my old ways. And that kind of became a reality when in 2020, at the end of 2020, I got a phone call saying that my dad shot himself in the head, but he survived it. He lost his right eye, but he lived. And my dad did this because he was diagnosed with ALS. He was struggling for about 3 years before he did this. He was a very prideful man. Like I said, he was in the Coast Guard as a helicopter rescue swimmer. He saved many lives throughout his career. And for his body to deteriorate and him not be able to walk or stand or go to the bathroom, he was miserable. It's unfortunate in the state he was in, they don't do death with dignity. And so he felt like he had to do this. And unfortunate for him, but fortunately for my family, he lived. And, I'm sure my dad wasn't happy about that at first, but I moved him into my home because he couldn't take care of himself.
Yeah.
So I took care of him for a few months. My husband and I, or Justin, I should say, we're not technically married, but I call him my husband. We've been together for 7 years. So Justin and I took care of my father for a few months, and he ended up passing away in February of 21. I was so grateful because in my recovery, I found ways to cope with my emotions, my feelings. I was able to stay out of a depression. I was able to stay away from drugs. I was able to continue on in my recovery after my father's death and incident. And, it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy thing to do. But I couldn't believe I did it. And after, how long maybe about a year or a year and a half after my father passed away is when I started sharing on TikTok. I got such an overwhelming positive response. People really were interested in my story. People couldn't believe all of it. Actually, a lot of people are like, what, your dad did what?
Yeah.
I get messages every day of people, they need help, or they're in similar depression, similar grief, similar addiction. And it has been so incredibly healing. to help these people and to share my story, just to talk, just to talk about the traumas. I've created a safe space, a community of people on TikTok that can talk about this stuff and feel comfortable talking and be supported. So it's been pretty crazy, but I'm grateful for it.
That's amazing. So around 2022 is when you posted the TikTok?
Yeah, I guess, or it
2022?
might be 20, maybe it was just a few months after, maybe the end of 21.
End of 21.
Yeah.
You've clearly suffered so much trauma and so much loss, and you have this knight in shining armor drop sort of into your lap over on the internet, right? But he comes and he brings you home, and he has this, I guess, is Justin's not sober though, right? Is he sober?
Yeah, he's sober.
He is. So he saw, okay. So he
He's
saw,
not, but he was never an addict. He was never
right,
an addict. So he's just naturally like, that's just him. He doesn't like to drink.
yeah,
He might have a beer or two here and there, but we don't go out and buy beer. So
right.
yes, he's basically sober.
So he
So
comes and he says we need to do an intervention, and he's there for you. He becomes your knight in shining armor, I guess, again, and you guys fall in love and you have a baby now, which is amazing, right? And then your dad, yes, I mean, I couldn't believe, I did know, I knew about your sister. Obviously, I watched some of your stuff, and then I know about your dad. And but where do you get to the place where you say, I want to share this with the world? And what made you want to do that?
I'm going to be totally honest.
Yes,
When
please.
I when I started TikTok, when I downloaded it, it was towards like maybe the end of COVID-ish. Everything was coming back to normal. I was always like, oh, TikTok is for dance videos. It's for little kids. So I never downloaded it. When I downloaded it, I started looking at videos, and I came across sad videos about grief, about mental health and addiction. And it really touched me. And I remember thinking to myself, I could make that same video, but with my own pictures, my own story. And that's what I started doing. I just was like, I could make that. And so I made it, and it would blow up. It would blow up. And then I started getting a lot of followers and a lot of comments, messages of people wanting my help. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I ready for this? I don't know
Sure.
exactly what I'm doing, but it's going so fast. So that's really how I started. And I am fortunate that I don't have a job or anything like that requires me to not be allowed to speak about this stuff.
Sure.
Like, my family's super supportive. The only people really that I would care their opinions on is like my mom and my brother, and they don't care. They're like, yeah, whatever, it's old news, it's our past. So they're like, share whatever you want. And I'm really digging deep into like mental health and everything, like what causes this, what causes addiction, what causes people to feel this way.
Yeah.
And the coping mechanisms that I found that really help is journaling, meditating. I listen to ASMR. I do breathing exercises. I see a therapist. I see a psychiatrist. All of that combined really, really has an impact on your recovery. I used to always think, I'd be like, oh, that meditating and stuff like that, oh, that's for woo woo, that's kind of woo woo or
Right.
something like that, until I started doing it. And I was like, wow, this has changed my mindset in a completely different way.
Yeah, that's
So,
amazing. I more than dabble in meditation. I just can't seem to get in like this real groove. I go in like sporadic a lot. I do meditate in not a lot, but I struggle to have it in like my actual full blown routine. But I'm not giving up on it, because I'm in a good place when I am meditating, even if it's 10 minutes. Like you get really
right.
quiet. Just to I find I'm more patient with my children.
Yeah.
I'm just a better play, more patient, more kind of present, I think, is a big word too, is when I meditate. But you read all the amazing benefits, and I've been sober 17 plus years, and meditation is actually in the 12 steps, right? And even with
Yeah.
that, it's something I still, I say I struggle with. I'm better than I was, 10 years ago, but I still have a long way to go with it. But I know it's got so many healing benefits and so many benefits all around. But what you're talking about also is what's so important. And did you have an inkling that you would help any people, one person, so many people, which you are helping? Did you have an inkling of that when you first started posting?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea. I
Yeah.
didn't, I mean, I knew that, of course, I know we all have traumas and we all go through devastating things in life, but I had no idea that so many people are suffering. They feel comfortable to come to me. I don't know, it's amazing.
It goes without saying, but I'm going to say it, like, that takes so much courage to post that first video, and let
Right.
alone to keep going. And then you start getting some traction, right? And some feedback. And I can tell you said, like, oh my gosh, am I like ready for this? Right. I
Yes.
totally understand. Maybe you have like imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it. Right. You
Yeah.
get that fear, like, oh my gosh, there's actually, am I good enough for this? I'm talking about, this is what I would say to myself, because I have a problem with, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough
Right.
across the board. Like, I could put, I'm not enough on anything really. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. But so
Mhm.
now you have people, and doesn't it feel amazing, right? You have strangers, perfect strangers from really across the world, certainly
Yes.
across the country, that you're impacting with your videos and you're helping. How does that's gotta, I know you said before it's healing, but it's got to be even more than just healing, right? Because now you got to have, I can see it in your eyes, a sense of purpose with this.
Absolutely. It blows my mind, how many people that I have reached, and people that, like I said before, are in similar situations. It's amazing. I had a friend of mine come on my TikTok not that long ago. She's a childhood best friend, and she shared her story. When she was 17, she accidentally killed a 17-year-old boy. She shared her story, and the messages that I got of people in similar situations as her, even. We need to be more understanding of what people are going through. Like my husband, when he was killed, he was killed by another airman on accident. When that happened, just my friend's accident was just a few years prior to that. And I didn't notice it at the time. It wasn't till later in my recovery that I noticed my best friend going through that really helped me understand and forgive the man that killed my husband, because they were both accidents, freak accidents. And it gave me perspective on the situation. A lot of people might hold hate in their heart, if that were to happen to them. But I think I was able to let it go because I saw what my friend went through when she accidentally killed somebody. So I don't know. It's amazing
Yeah.
what sharing can do, online.
It's funny. Speaking of, myself and my, alcoholism and addictions or what have you, I grew up, you don't share anything with anybody. Like, just, I'm sure you can relate. Like, you
Oh
keep
my,
everything in. And if you even like share anything with anyone else, you're weak. What's wrong with you? Like, this is, kind of man up, that bravado, which is it's all a bunch of BS. It really is.
I,
And, the fact that I learned, and the fact that I'm in a public forum myself now, even being openly honest with, my alcoholism, even everyone around me knows my situation. And it's not a secret, but this is a little different in starting a podcast and coming in public like this. But
right.
the fact that the act of sharing your story, because that's really what it is. Like, AA is where I got sober and saved my life, but it's the sharing of stories. It's the sharing of things you went through, and it took me a long time to even in sobriety to actually, trust one person on the phone or alone in a room of what, things that have happened to me as a kid or even as a
Right.
young adult. And what happens is, the more you share, the more you connect with people, and people need that connection and they need that community. And you're
Yeah.
100% right. Like, I say it all the time, like, you never know what's going on with that person. Like, everyone has their stuff, right?
Every
And everyone's got their stuff. But the act of what you're doing too is, just by sharing your incredible story, now you have your friend come on, you have other stories that are
Mhm.
connecting more people, and it's lessening the stigma every single view of mental health. And because this stuff wasn't around, or if it was
Taboo.
right. Yeah. It was in a basement. It was in a church basement, or not even, mental health really wasn't even talked about. Alcoholism, at least, was talked about since, in AA, as far as AA is concerned, late 30s. But,
Right.
you are lessening the stigma, and everyone, not, I don't want to say everyone, but so many people suffer from all sorts of traumas, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, alcoholism, like all of it. Some of people, the entire gamut. And the subtle act, I say subtle, maybe that's not the right word, because you actually went out in public and you made a video and you blasted it out to the world, right? It seems subtle, but it's not subtle. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, it's that little video, but look at the impact it's making, is what I'm trying to say in such a roundabout way. And you are affecting and helping people without even knowing, like perfect strangers, like I said. And it's such a beautiful thing. It really is.
I know it. I feel so blessed to be heard. I didn't know when I made those videos, in the beginning, I didn't know if they were going to do good or if I was going to get negative reactions. I just kind of did it. It's been so amazing. And the shame and guilt really fade when you have a safe space to tell your story. It really does.
Amen. Right. And I have plenty of shame that I have suffered, which I'm way past now, just because I've shared with it, or I've worked it out, or I'll share a story of shame and someone will say, hey, I went through a similar thing. It's that connection again. It's that community. Right. And, that's the beauty of it. Right. And it's so ironic that it's so, even though it's a little better, but it's so frowned upon, or at least that's how we grew up. It was so frowned upon. And really that's the real medicine that we all kind of need in a way.
Right. It's funny that you say that. So growing up, I too, my parents were always like, what happens in the family stays in the family. You don't talk about it with
Right.
anybody else. And I grew up that way. And, when I lost my sister, and then recently, just 3 years ago or 2 years ago, my dad, it came to a point where I'm an adult. I have nobody that I have to really answer to. So what is the harm in sharing now? Sharing our struggles, because gosh, I guarantee there's so many people in the same boat.
There is. You're exactly right. And these platforms, they didn't exist when we were younger,
Right.
right? There's no social media platforms, and for everything that social media is, there's a real power to it, and stuff like your stories and the people that you can really impact. This is stuff I'm just kind of learning as I go. Like, I used to know, I was never like on Facebook. Wasn't like my thing. And now here I am with a YouTube channel and social, media platform across all the platforms. I never wanted to, even like if you knew me in town or my friends, like you knew that I was sober, and I was very
Right.
open about it. And in fact, I want you to know, in case one day you need help or someone does that, reach out to me. But this was never on the radar to put myself in front of a camera. And your story is incredible, and I'm certainly not comparing, but just, I feel like there's a higher purpose already. Like, this is way bigger than Gary and his podcast. There's something bigger that's going on here. And I just started, but just getting a couple of DMs on the side that I've recently gotten, like, hey, I heard you on a podcast, thank you so much, I got a lot out of it. Like, it's that stuff, right? And you're doing it. Like, how many followers do you have now on TikTok?
I think it's 220,000 now.
It's amazing. Isn't that
It's
amazing?
crazy. I'm like, I'm a nobody. Like, I don't know why, but I guess people just like my stories and the inspiration, that I can give. And I'm so, gosh, like I said before, I'm just grateful that I have a platform to do this, because it's given me a lot of great opportunities.
Yeah, but you're not a nobody, and you know that. So don't even say that. Like, really, you're more, all of us, we're all not nobodies, and you're certainly not.
You're right.
You put yourself out there. And so you are a trailblazer. You're doing amazing, amazing work. And so
Thank you.
I've had this epiphany recently too, like all the things that have happened to me or things I put myself through as younger, child or adult. I want to turn it all those negative stuff. I'm going to turn it on its head, and I'm going to make it a positive. Like, I was out
Yeah.
from the get go, and now I'm hoping to inspire with stories like yours on my podcast that, people don't have to live that way anymore, and that they're not alone, that they can completely change their life around. And so all these little, epiphany or all these little thoughts of negative stuff that, there's a way we can turn this on its head. And I think it's in helping, and it's in sharing these vulnerable moments of our lives and sharing these out loud with people. For me, it's recovering out loud. Your story is incredible. Trauma out loud. You're helping people, and I think it's just amazing.
Yes. When I was in the depths of my addiction and grief, oh my gosh, if I had a community or someone to look up to, like what I'm trying to do now, I mean, I think it could have helped me a lot quicker,
Mm,
And I love what you said about changing a negative into a positive. That's something I intentionally do on my day to day. If I have a negative thought or anything like that, I immediately try to find a positive for it. And that alone, even just, it builds up, you do it over and over. It changes your entire mindset. I mean,
absolutely.
just from negative to positive.
Absolutely. And it's for me, I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'm not in that positive. I have to take the effort to get there. And I'll beat
Yes.
myself up too. Like, I'll be upset with myself that why do I wake up like this sometimes, and like I've learned to, like, Gary, don't beat yourself up. You're a human being. It's okay. But just work your way to the, into gratitude, into just knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. And, most of my stuff, if you will, these days are like future fear-based projections of, like,
Yeah.
this is going to happen, or that's going to happen, or that's not enough. And it's all just like, that old saying, like, just live in the day. Like, I'm going to butcher it, but, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. That's why today is a gift, and that's why it's called
Yes.
the
Yes.
present. So live in the present. So you have an entrepreneurial spirit too, though, don't you, Natalee?
I kind of do, I guess.
Tell us what some of the future holds for you, and what you're working on today.
Sure. So I am hoping to write a book. That's a comment I get so much. And
Right.
really, I never thought to write a book until I got so many people telling me to write a book. So I'm hoping to write a book. I do speaking engagements. I have a speaking engagement coming up. I'm going to speak to Gold Star parents who have lost their, son or daughter in the military. And yeah, I mean, I also do outreach support for addiction. I
Yep.
help people find treatment centers, facilities all over the US. I mean, I'm staying busy.
I'm sure. And where can we find you with all these endeavors? Where should we seek you out?
I am on TikTok, and
Mhm.
it is not Natalee King. Natalee is spelled, instead of IE, it's spelled EE at the end.
Yeah.
And then my Instagram is just Natalee King, and Natalee has 3 E's at the end of that. So
Right. I did notice that on Instagram. We're going to put this all in the show notes too, as well. And so everyone can find you. What would you tell? And I'm speaking to someone that reaches a lot of people. So, but what would you tell the people that are struggling with addiction or with trauma or everything in your world? What would you tell them, that newcomer? What's your advice to them?
you cannot do it alone. You have to have support, whether you're in grief, addiction, depression. You have to have support. And I couldn't have done it without support. Always reach out to somebody and take it. I know it's cliche, but take it one day at a time. If you can get past an hour at a time, you can get past the whole day. I mean, if I had all the answers, I could have saved a lot of people, but that's what I would do, have a great support system and take it one day at a time, ask for help.
I amen to that. So, and there's so much out there, right? There's so much support out there.
Absolutely. You can
It's
even message me if you're in addiction. I have resources for all over. You can message me anytime if you need advice or just to vent. my DMs are always open. So
Excellent. And is Instagram your best spot for the DMs, or is it Facebook? Is it
Instagram
all
or
of them?
TikTok, either
TikTok,
one.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we are going to put all that in the show notes. And Natalee, I can't thank you enough for coming on, sharing your story. It is more than inspiring. I've been following you. I know your videos on TikTok. I've been watching some of your podcasts, but I mean, it's a pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story and for recovering out loud, and everything that you do is amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it so much.
I look forward to staying in touch and certainly following the future for you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another powerful episode of the Begin Again podcast. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. We hope that today's conversation has ignited a spark within you, affirming that recovery is not only attainable, but can also be a wellspring of strength and resilience. Our ultimate goal is to make a difference in someone's life every single day. By sharing these stories of redemption, we strive to empower you and inspire you to unlock your fullest potential, facilitate positive transformations, and contribute to creating a better future for yourself, for your loved ones, and the world at large. If you know someone who could benefit from listening to our show, please share it with them. And if you resonate with our mission and feel compelled to do so, we would greatly appreciate your support through a 5-star review, following us on Instagram, and subscribing to our YouTube channel, The Begin Again Podcast. The more positive reviews we receive and the wider our message spreads, the greater our collective ability to help others realize that change is possible in their own lives. Thank you once again for being a part of our community. May you be blessed on your own journey of personal growth and transformation.